Welcome to the Deep Dive. We cut through the noise, grab a stack of fascinating research, and really extract the knowledge you need to be immediately well-informed. Today, we're diving into something that sounds simple, but gets complicated fast. It's this question. What's the difference between just naming something and really knowing its deeper meaning? I mean, on the surface, if I say cup, I know what it means, right? But our sources argue that pulling those two things apart, naming versus meaning, is actually crucial to defining reality itself. So this deep dive, specifically for you listening, looks at the connection between how we use language, that's the naming meaning distinction, and, well, what the universe is, the essence existence distinction.
Yeah, it's like that classic map versus territory idea. What is reality? That's an ontological question. That's the existence part.
Right.
But what we know about reality, that's different. That's epistemic. That's where essence comes in. We don't get direct access to reality as it is. We only ever deal with reality as we understand it, as we know it.
And that gap between the what is and the what we know means words have to do like double duty. They can't just be simple labels.
Exactly. They have to perform two pretty distinct jobs. If I say the word water first, the word has to denote something. It needs a reference. It points to that actual stuff in the world, the substance we drink. That job is fairly straightforward, maybe what the sources call reductive. It ties directly to the existence and the identity of the thing itself.
Okay, so that's job one. What's the second job?
Well, the word also has to connote something, a meaning, an inherent nature. So when you say water, you don't just mean, a bunch of H2O molecules floating around.
You mean the stuff that's clear, liquid, quenches your thirst?
Precisely, sustains life. That function is non-reductive. It goes beyond just the physical identity, and it gets us into the essence of what water is.
Okay, so naming connects to identity and existence. Meaning connects to the inherent nature, the essence. Our mission today, then, is to figure out why we need the split to understand reality properly. Because, as the sources point out, not everything we can talk about, not everything that has meaning, actually exists in the way we might first think.
That's exactly right. And that brings us straight to the starting point, really. Ontological commitment. Before we can even talk about meaning or essence, we have to kind of commit to what mode of being the thing we're talking about has. The source material breaks down everything we can discuss into three, let's call them worlds of being.
Okay, let's lay these out. What are the three types of reality or being?
First up, the most intuitive one, existence. This is the straightforward, concrete, material world. Your chair, this microphone, the coffee you might be drinking. Naming here just affirms something's identity in the empirical world we see and touch. Second, there's subsistence. Now, this is the abstract, non-physical reality. Think about numbers or mathematical concepts like geometry.
Right, like the number 7 or...
Exactly. A triangle's properties, like having angles that add up to 180 degrees, those are considered eternal. They don't depend on a physical triangle existing somewhere. The source says these concepts subsist in the mind. They're real, definitely real, but their reality is abstract, non-physical.
So number 7 is real, but it doesn't exist like my dog exists. It doesn't have that physical material presence. It has a reality that needs a mind to conceive it, but it's not tangible. That's subsistence.
Correct. It's a concept, but one that's universally true, you could say. And then the third world is subsistence. This one kind of catches everything else that lacks material or numerical reality, but still, we think about them. They occupy our minds.
Ah, so like objects of imagination.
Precisely. Think of Pegasus, the mythical horse.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe a contradiction like a round square. We can name these things easily, right?
Okay.
We can even discuss their supposed properties.
Sure, Pegasus has wings. A round square is impossible.
Right. But they are modes of non-being. They don't exist. They don't even subsist like numbers do. They subsist.
Wow. Okay, so we can use the same kind of words, the same grammar, to talk about a round square which subsists, the number pi which subsists, and this microphone right here which exists. If words didn't have that dual function, that naming part and that meaning part, well, our conversations would just fall apart depending on which kind of being we were talking about.
It would be chaos. Basically gibberish. Naming without meaning is just noise, and meaning without a name, without a reference, is just this floating idea with no anchor in any kind of reality. You need both. You need the existence identity reference, that reductive part, and you need the non-reductive meaning essence part to actually communicate about reality across all three of these modes of being.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because now we have to tackle that non-reductive side, essence. What actually makes a thing that specific thing and not something else? And one of the really compelling arguments in the sources challenges the maybe obvious idea. defining essence by just looking at its basic ingredients, its reductive composition. Think about it. If you zoom way down, like to the subatomic level, everything that exists, gold, iron, this table, a tree, it's all fundamentally made of the same basic bits, right? Quarks and electrons.
Yeah, mostly up and down quarks forming protons and neutrons. It's the same cosmic Lego bricks, essentially.
Yeah.
And this creates a huge philosophical puzzle for defining essence. If gold and iron are just different arrangements or quantities of the exact same fundamental stuff, well, how do you define the essence that makes gold gold and iron iron?
Their identity is different. Gold has 79 protons, iron has 26. But the stuff they're made of is identical at the base level.
Exactly. So essence can't simply be the raw ingredients list. It has to be defined differently. It has to be about a property, something inherent that distinguishes it. The source suggests essence must be defined as an essential property, maybe an accidental one, or even an emergent one.
Okay, let's make this concrete. You mentioned sources use specific examples, like water.
Right, water's a classic. The philosopher Saul Kripke famously argued that if water is H2O, chemically speaking, then H2O must be water in all possible universes. For Kripke, the identity, H2O, is fundamentally locked to the essence. It's a necessary truth.
That seems logical. H2O is water.
But our sources push back on this a bit. They ask, what if we define water by its function? What if its essence is primarily about sustaining life? Imagine we found some liquid on another planet, let's call it XYZ. It looks and acts like water, quenches thirst, supports life there. But chemically, it's totally different from H2O.
Ah, I see.
By a purely functional definition, you might be compelled to call XYZ water, even though its chemical identity is different. So the whole debate is identity the essence? Or is identity just sort of linked to a function or role?
Okay, and there's another famous example you mentioned, the table. That helps clarify this accidental property idea.
Yes, the table example really drives it home. What's the true essence of a table? The sources argue it's really about its utility, having a flat, raised surface used for working or eating or placing things on.
So having 4 legs isn't essential.
Apparently not. According to the sources, having 4 legs is an accidental part of its essence. If you use a big wooden crate or a sturdy tree stump as a surface for your dinner, functionally, it is a table in that moment. The whatness of the thing, what philosophers sometimes call its quiddity, that's found in its function, its purpose, not necessarily the specific number of legs or the material it's made from.
Right, the function defines it. Now, connecting essence back to existence, this raises a really fundamental question about beginnings, about causality. Did the thing we're defining have a start, a cause? Because that apparently changes everything about how we see its essence.
It really does. It splits philosophical thought dramatically. On one side, you've got thinkers tracing back to Plato. If the universe, or even just an object like a chair, had an intelligent cause, if there was a design, a plan...
Then the idea came first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The essence precedes existence. The blueprint, the concept, the idea of the chair comes first, and the physical chair that exists is just, well, a copy or an instance of that idea.
Yeah.
Essence dictates existence.
Okay, that's one view. What's the alternative?
The alternative is pretty radical, often associated with existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre. If existence has just always been, if the universe has no inherent designer, no built-in cause or purpose, then, well, existence precedes essence.
Yeah, we just are, and then we figure out what we are.
Sort of. For humans, Sartre would say, we're born first, existence, and then we define our own essence through our choices and actions. And for objects in this view, defining an intrinsic essence becomes incredibly tricky because there's no pre-existing design or purpose to point to. It just is. This is actually why discussing the essence of God is so philosophically challenging. If God is defined ontologically as a necessary eternal being, one without a beginning,
then you can't make that split between essence and existence in the same way.
Right. It becomes very hard, maybe impossible, to know the essence, the actual true inherent nature, because there was no before, no design process we could analyze. God's existence and essence are often seen as inseparable if God exists necessarily. It just is.
Okay, so essence is this kind of elusive property. It's tied to function, maybe identity sometimes, and it gets complicated by whether the thing had a beginning or a design. How on earth do we communicate about essence reliably then? This seems to lead us into problems with communication itself.
It absolutely does. And that brings us to the big communication challenges discussed in the sources. First, there's the challenge associated with the philosopher W.V.O. Quine. He talked a lot about the indeterminacy of meaning, especially in translation. His work sometimes gets interpreted as suggesting words might be so ambiguous that they're essentially meaning indeterminate. Like maybe meaning just isn't stable enough.
Whoa, that sounds bad for communication. If words don't have a determined meaning, how do we ever really know what someone else is saying? How do we understand each other?
Well, that's the core of the counterargument presented in our sources. They really push back against that interpretation. They argue that indeterminacy doesn't mean meaning is dead or absent. Instead, it suggests meaning is often multiple, or maybe duplicitous. It can mean several related things at once. Quine's own famous example was the word gavagai. Imagine a linguist observing a native speaker shout, "Gavagai," as a rabbit runs past.
Right, does it mean rabbit?
Or does it mean, look, rabbit parts, or an instance of rabbithood occurring, or dinner running away? Quine's point was about the difficulty of pinning down the exact reference. But the source material's take is, this isn't a lack of meaning. It's actually a richness, a multiplicity of possible meanings. Words aren't meaning empty, they're meaning ridden. We manage to communicate because we navigate this shared ambiguity using context, shared intentions, and experience.
Okay, that makes more sense. The meaning isn't gone, it's just layered.
Yeah.
Or maybe context dependent. So what about the second challenge? The explicability of essence. If essence isn't a physical thing we can point to, if it's not an ontological given like a rock, how can we rely on it? How can it be stable enough to communicate?
Yeah, that's a common philosophical worry. Essence can feel elusive, maybe even inexplicable, as some like Swinburne have suggested. But the resolution offered here is quite compelling, I think. It argues that while essence might not be an ontological given, not a physical fact, it is an epistemic given. It's something we know, something we define. For language and communication to work at all, essence must be explicable. We have to be able to define and share what we mean by the inherent, non-reductive nature of a thing. It's about defining what is intentional. Okay. So it's real in the sense that we can know it and talk about it, even if it's not made of atoms. Precisely. And that kind of brings everything together. This is the synthesis of the whole deep dive, really. Naming establishes the ends of existence and identity, that concrete reductive pointing function. And meaning establishes the is of essence, the non-reductive inherent nature or function or quiddity we were talking about. We absolutely need both sides of this coin to effectively connect our words to the complex three-layered reality we actually live in and talk about.
Okay, fantastic. Let's just quickly recap the core takeaways one last time for everyone listening.
Sounds good. First, remember, every key word, especially nouns, has those two vital jobs. Denotation, which is about naming the identity and is tied to existence.
And connotation, which is about explaining the inherent nature, the meaning, and that's tied to essence.
Second, that naming part, the identity fixing, happens across those three distinct worlds of being we outlined. The physical material world, existence.
The abstract world of math and concepts, subsistence.
And the mental world of imagination and even contradictions, existence.
Got it. And finally,
Remember that meaning, the essence, usually isn't found just by looking at the raw ingredients, the reductive components. Defining essence takes some non-reductive thinking. It involves looking at utility, function, maybe origins or causality, the real whatness of the thing.
and critically, our sources argue very strongly that you simply cannot affirm the essence of something unless you can locate it in some form of being. It has to exist or subsist or at least subsist. If it's totally outside those categories, well, you don't really have anything concrete enough to define.
Yeah, and that leaves us with a final, maybe provocative question for you to think about after this. Consider some concept you value, something important in your daily life. Maybe it's an abstract moral principle like justice, or a creative idea you're working on, or even just a historical name you think about often. Ask yourself, if you couldn't firmly establish the truth of its existence in one of those three modes we discussed, existence, subsistence, could you really establish the truth of its essence? What kind of being does that concept need to have for it to hold real, verifiable meaning for you?
Something to definitely mull over. We'll leave you with that thought. Thanks for diving deep with us today.